Hello, gorgeous soul friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Hannah. Welcome to my channel, and what an honor it is to be a part of your wondrous earth experience today. So we're going to discuss ancestral karma, inherited trauma, and growing up with a narcissistic parent. Because I think that this is something a lot of us go through silently. There's a big social stigma I've noticed where people hold their family presentation in very high regard. People don't like to talk about their dysfunctional family dynamics, and part of why I'm putting out this video is to change that. I'm really just wanting to validate anybody out there who is going through something similar. You're not alone, and it does get better, and I'm here to share that with you. I'm here to kind of give you evidence of that. I really aim to empower people out there who can relate to my experience, because I understand that there is often invalidation of your feelings when it comes to growing up with a narcissistic parent. Either the narcissistic parent or people around you may try to convince you that you're the problem, or they may try to convince you that your feelings aren't valid and that you should just brush them off for the sake of family, right? You're not alone. It gets better, okay? I'm here to kind of provide that comfort for you, provide that certainty, you know, and this is really going to be a space for you guys to share your own experiences as well, like in the comment section. I really would love to hear about your guys' experience if you would feel called to share. I'm sure there's other people out there who will find your experience very much relatable and validating for their own. So this is something that I still to this day am somewhat working through. Like, a lot of the traumas and a lot of the issues that have been bred out of this relationship are things that I'm still working through today. I feel like a lot of it I've overcome through complete emancipation and just like separating entirely. But I know not everybody has that availability. Like, not everybody can do that. I wasn't able to do that for many, many years, and it genuinely does feel like a prison. So I completely understand, like, when life feels like a prison because of a narcissistic parent. You're not alone, okay? It gets easier. And this video is to give you hope so that you keep pushing through and you really work towards empowering yourself, so that whoever it is that you're watching this video about, that they no longer have power over you, that they're no longer able to impact you emotionally and make you almost like a punching bag, right? Because that's really what narcissists do, is they make us emotional punching bags. I need to talk about this because there are many of you out there who are also facing this issue, who are made to feel outcasted, crazy, you've been abused, manipulated, the whole 9 yards by the one person in the world that is supposed to protect you. Or sometimes both, because I've seen situations where people come out of households where both parents are narcissistic. Thankfully, I only had to deal with one, but I know some of you guys out there have both, who are experiencing this plague of narcissism, as we'll call it. And it just breaks my heart that some of you are facing this completely alone. You know, I don't know what I would do if I didn't have my siblings to validate my experience, to be able to fall back on, and to support my perceptions. Because I know some of you guys don't even have that. You might be an only child, or you might have siblings who don't support you. Maybe they've been turned against you, you know what I mean? Because that often happens in narcissistic households too. You know, the whole family gets turned against the black sheep. So I understand, and I'm making this for you. I want to be your support. I want to be that person for you. This video is going to be that for you. So this video is really for all of you who understand the hell of dealing with a narcissistic parent, who have undergone or are currently undergoing the same struggles that I have. And, you know, maybe a lot of you have tirelessly tried to sustain a relationship with this person for the sake of family, but you've had inner conflict because obviously you have to draw a line at some point for your own mental sake. And I think a good majority of people have at least one parental figure that could be classified as narcissistic. I want to first dive into the meaning of narcissist, because I see this label being thrown around in the mental health space a lot. And I think that this label can be kind of damaging in the sense that it can really take away from the humanity of the people who we consider narcissistic. Because regardless of the things that they've done, they are human, and they are extremely wounded humans who have really just become slaves to their unconscious repetition of trauma, their karma. They're slaves to their karma. And it doesn't mean that we have to be okay with the abuse or that we have to accept it. It's just important for our own sanity, okay, to at least harbor some level of empathy for them. Because holding on to anger and resentment is like holding on to a hot piece of coal. It hurts nobody but you. So it's really important to understand this for your own sake, okay, that they are human. It really is that they are just slaves to their karma. They're slaves to the things that have happened to them in life, and they're unconsciously repeating that trauma. If anything, we should feel sorry for them. They really deserve pity over all things. Because narcissism isn't necessarily a disorder in the way that mainstream psychology likes to label it. Narcissism is a frequency, and it's a frequency of mind that anyone on earth can tap into. Okay, everyone has the capability to be narcissist, and narcissistic qualities often express themselves in people who have endured deep, deep trauma that they are not willing to integrate. There is a silver lining to the aspect of suffering. We come into material form, we take on these forms to integrate trauma and release it. It is said that the Earth School is one of the hardest schools for this reason, and it's also one of the most prestigious for this reason. And in a spiritually healthy individual, this trauma is integrated, and the lessons affiliated with that trauma are extracted, and they contribute to the further development of that soul. Sometimes people even end up taking their traumas and turning them into wisdom for other people, like my fellow Plutonians out there, people who have heavy scorpionic influence in their chart or Plutonian influence in their chart often take on trauma as a way to be a guide for other people. In a spiritually unconscious individual, though, the trauma is not integrated and it festers as a result. It's like when you leave a wound and you don't clean it. It becomes infected. And it makes one susceptible to lower astral influence. Their trauma literally becomes their own demon, after which a process of deterioration begins. Deterioration of the heart center. And I've spoke about this in my Esoteric Human Form video. You can check it out in the description box below. The heart is seen as the center of spiritual awareness. So when one disconnects from the heart, they're pretty much disconnecting from their sense of self. They're disconnecting from their spirit. And they exhibit unconscious behaviors that are impulse reactions from these lower astral forces. So what happens is when somebody disconnects from the heart space, it makes them more susceptible to attachments from lower astral entities. So their trauma and their negative experiences that have festered literally become the demons that feed off of them. So as a result, they exhibit these unconscious behaviors that are really just impulse reactions from these lower astral entities. They're in survival mode 100% of the time. And that's why they act so absurdly sometimes, for lack of a better word, because they're operating from survival mode 24/7. So if people with festering trauma bear children, then these survivalistic impulses are projected onto and retained by the child. And this is creating what we all know in the spiritual community as ancestral karma. So trauma can either imprint itself within the DNA in a constructive way when it's integrated, or in a deconstructive way when it's not. Regardless, it still impresses upon the DNA. So whether or not the trauma is integrated, it impresses on the DNA and it impacts the further evolution of that lineage. And the DNA is carried over from parent to child, and if not integrated, it will result in a replication of the traumatic experiences that the child will then have to work through. So holding on to resentment will actually work against you. And this is why I say there is some level of empathy that's required in order to truly heal from these experiences. It's so important to regularly check in with yourself and honor the emotions that you feel related to dealing with any narcissistic figure in your life. Suppression of the emotions is common, as the idea of resenting a parental figure can be quite painful. I mean, we're biologically programmed to love our parents. So by having resentment And by harboring this anger, we're going against our own biology. It can be a very confusing experience. Be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself, especially for those of you who have family members that are maybe not as empathetic and understanding of what you're going through. You know, maybe they invalidate your inner battle, maybe they tell you to suppress it because it's family and you need to keep this relationship because blood is thicker than water, and all of those excuses, right? We've heard them all. First step to overcoming narcissistic abuse is to honor thyself. And do your best to not let this person's perception of who they think you should be get in the way of who you truly are. This is especially the case for people who have different life plans than what the narcissist parent envisions. They see you as an extension of them, that you're just here to fulfill their will, you're here to fulfill their destiny, but you're not. And I want to make that very clear. You are not here to fulfill anybody's destiny or wishes or make anybody happy but yourself. Okay, first and foremost. And we often see this being the case in scenarios where a parent pushes their child to pursue a career path that was a once broken dream for the parent, or a hobby. Arranged marriages could also be another example of this. Through the process of conception and drawing a soul down into material form, you are making a pact with the earth that you're going to mold a whole human consciousness so that it can carry on the lineage of being a caretaker for the earth. Our children are here to be of service in their own unique way, in a way that they decide. We get to choose our destiny. We get to choose what we're here to fulfill. And I experienced this in my own life when beginning my content creation journey. My mother always pushed me to go to school, and after changing my major 4 times and wasting a bunch of money, I realized that what I'm here to do does not require a degree. I still have pursued higher education in other ways. I've gotten certifications. Many of you know that I'm yoga certified, I'm Reiki certified. I intend on getting more certifications in the future. And I've also pursued the endless journey of occult knowledge and, you know, attaining wisdom so that I can further be a teacher for you guys. I realized that I'm not really here to fill a role in a pre-existent industry. I'm here to pave the path for a new one to come forth. During my darker pitfalls in life, support was nowhere to be found. And if anything, my hardship was made worse by belittlement, humiliation, being compared to other people, all kinds of stuff. You know, my mother's always been my biggest bully. And ever since I was a child, she has always been there to push me down. I was so young when the mistreatment began, I could never fully understand what I was doing at 6 or 7 to deserve mistreatment the way that I was receiving. I wasn't a perfect kid, but overall I was well behaved. I mean, I was an AB student. I was placed in advanced programs like the Gifted and Talented program, AP classes, dual credit, up until I was a senior in high school. Not that any of that shit actually determines somebody's value, but I do believe that she bought into that. I think that she believed that that was what determined the value of a person. Just as most of the Western world believes that that's what determines somebody's value, is how much, you know, education they have in traditional school settings. It always seemed like I was desperately clawing at this ever increasingly unattainable standard. And each time I thought I had reached it, the bar had just been set higher. It still wasn't enough. I was overexhausting myself, and I think a lot of us unconsciously retain our critical parent's voice in our head. We always retain it like in the back of our minds. I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but throughout my whole experience up until very recently, I feel like I carried this voice of excessive criticism in my mind, which was really just my mom's voice being replicated in my own mind. And I noticed that I began working against myself. For a long time, I would constantly self-sabotage. I developed a habit of self-sabotage because this ever-critical voice of my mother was always present inside my head, telling me that what I was doing was wrong and just making me second-guess everything. Narcissistic people often dehumanize others because they've lost connection to the humanity within themselves. So it's not uncommon for them to be overly critical during times of hardship, failing to empathize with your struggle. There's no room for mistakes with a narcissistic parent. You pretty much have to be perfect all the time, or you're not good enough. And even when you are trying to be perfect, you're still not good enough. So it's kind of a lose-lose no matter what you do. It often gets to a point where it's safer and easier to lie to them because they're not emotionally mature enough to be able to handle the truth. And a lot of you may have experienced this in your own lives as well. Maybe you find yourself lying to your narcissistic parent a lot because it's just easier. Because if you tell them the truth, they'll have an emotional breakdown, or they'll start drama, or it's just a whole mess. Narcissistic parents overall create a very unsafe environment for their kids, whether it's emotionally or physically. I've heard of instances of narcissistic parents engaging in drug use or unhealthy sexual behavior while their child is around. This wasn't necessarily my experience, but other instances, like in my case, physical abuse is involved. I never felt safe being alone with my mother. I always felt like I had to tiptoe around her fragile emotions and ego like a ticking time bomb. At the time, I was gaslit to believe that I was deserving of the abuse. And as I got older, I realized that my mom found some degree of enjoyment in my suffering. I truly believe that. I truly believe that my own mother has a very sadistic personality. I think she finds enjoyment in hurting other people. Personally, I won't even spank my kids when they come, when they're brought down into this material reality. I don't agree with even just spanking anymore after my experience with this, because I think it dysregulates the nervous system and creates unnecessary trauma. I think it also teeters on a very fine line of abuse. You know, at what point is too much? That's my thing with it. And human psychology doesn't even respond well to negative reinforcement. There are other ways to recondition bad behavior that don't involve physical harm. I don't think in any circumstance any physical abuse is necessary to reprimand a child for their mistakes and for their wrongdoings. Narcissistic parents are often sadistic and have cruel methods of punishment that don't always involve physical abuse. Humiliation is a common tactic that I experienced in my life, and I'm sure many of you can relate to. My mom would humiliate me, not just in front of my family members, but in front of friends, in front of romantic partners, even in public. I dreaded going out in public with her because I was just always so concerned on whether or not she was going to embarrass me. I lost friends because of her behavior. People didn't want to hang out with me because they would come over to my house and my mom would have an emotional outburst and temper tantrum in front of them. And don't even get me started on my romantic relationships, because that's a whole that's a whole story of its own. I won't go into too much detail, but I will give you guys a little tidbit. Narcissist parents want their kids to remain in a state of codependency, and if anything or anyone comes between them and that dependence, they will make it their mission to sabotage. And I experienced this in my own life. My mother played a role in the downfall of about 95% of my past romantic relationships. I'm not negating any interrelational problems that were present, because there were obviously other factors. It wasn't just my mom, but she did play a pretty significant role. And a lot of those problems were exacerbated by her actions. So I do believe that she sabotaged a lot of my relationships. And sometimes it's very subtle. Sometimes it's easy for them to brush it off and be like, no, of course not. I want you to be happy. I want you to be successful. I want you to be with that person. But at the end of the day, deep down, they really are insecure and they need you. They rely on your energy to sustain them. So if they sense anybody coming in between that, they're going to sabotage it, even if it's unconscious. As a kid, I was frequently kicked out of the house. I often found myself having to stay with friends or romantic partners for prolonged periods of time, because my home environment was just so toxic. It was so unsafe that I literally didn't have a home. And I think I was probably like 8 or 9 when I first got kicked out, and it continued for the duration of my childhood. It continued all the way up into my adulthood. Pretty much the whole duration of me living with my parents, I was constantly in and out of the house. I was constantly getting kicked out. My mother always used our home as a pawn in her control over me. It was always her home, and never my home. It was never my sister's home. It was her house. I carried this trauma with me into adulthood, and even living on my own, I still struggled feeling at home in my own space. And it wasn't until I was completely on my own with no roommates, nobody, financially independent, that I literally broke down crying because I had never felt that level of control over my life, over my space, over myself. It was completely liberating. Even after leaving, I thought I could develop a healthier relationship with her through creating that distance, but this was not the case. She quickly grew resentful of my independence and my distance. And I admit, after I moved out, I did keep her at arm's length. And she had a tendency to call me and text me multiple times a day. I'm not even exaggerating, like multiple, maybe like 4 or 5 calls a day, multiple texts throughout the day. And she would get bothered if I didn't call her back or if I didn't respond within a certain time frame. So something that I thought would ease the tension with my mother only exacerbated it. She frequently bought me things only to hold them over my head later. Any financial power she had over me, she would abuse. Eventually, after some pretty deep-cut betrayals, I decided that enough was enough, and I completely cut her off. No contact, I do not speak to her, and I don't intend to for a while. Because I'm still working through this. Basically, I just told her that you cannot build a relationship with no respect involved, and she clearly does not respect me, and that lack of respect has caused me to not respect her. And there's no way you can build a healthy relationship when neither party respects the other. And I personally have been better ever since. Like, my life has improved significantly, my health, my mental space, my mental health has improved. I do get sad sometimes, you know, I'm not gonna lie. Like, it is saddening to not have that relationship with a parent. You know, you see other people who are like best friends with their parents, they're super close, you know what I mean, with like in my case, like I would see friends of mine that were like best friends with their mom, and I never had that, you know, and I feel like that was something that always hurt me. I was never jealous or like angry about it. It never made me like resent my friends or anything like that, but it was always something that made me sad. It was always something that made me really sad, because I knew that I probably would never have that with my mother. And even to this day, like, I still don't think I'll ever have that with my mother. And I'm okay with that now. I've gotten to a point where I accept that. I am living with it. And even though it is sad, it's a lot less sad than having to deal with the bullshit that she's put me through. So, you know, this is for those of you who are maybe even considering no contact. I know it's a very difficult decision. It's not an easy decision. No matter how much abuse your parent puts you through, it's not an easy decision to cut them off. Because again, going back to what I was saying earlier at the beginning of this video, you're going against your own biology by resenting them. You know, there's this inner conflict because there's a part of you that wants to love them. You're programmed to love them. But you also have to draw a line at some point and be like, enough is enough. Because you, at the end of the day, have to have your back. Because if they're not supporting you and you're not supporting you, then who is? I really want to hammer this portion of the video home because I know that there are many of you watching who are still going through it. You're still dealing with this narcissistic person. You haven't gone no contact. They're still impacting your life in a negative way. You know, a lot of you are still in the thick of it, and it gets better. I really want to hammer that home. It gets better. Do not let this person break you. I have to really emphasize that. You cannot let these people break you, guys. I'm like getting so teary-eyed thinking about this, so I'm gonna try not to cry on camera, but you really cannot let them break you. Okay, if anything, this experience is gonna turn you into the best version of yourself if you actively channel this correctly and you channel this wisdom properly. And the wisdom that you've gained throughout the abuse, there's wisdom within it. There's wisdom within the abuse. I know it's so hard to see for many of you that are still in it, but there's a lot to be learned. There's a lot to be learned from the experience that you're going through, and I just want you to know that you're heard. Okay? I'm not gonna cry on camera. I'm crying on camera. I just want you to know that you're heard, you're felt, you're seen, you're appreciated, and you're valid. You really have to push through all the bullshit, or completely detach from it if you can. I really think the only solution with a narcissist is no contact until they display changes within their ways. And sometimes they do. Sometimes they are willing to go within and transmute that part of self. Just because somebody's a narcissist, it doesn't mean it's over, and that's just who they are, and that's who they're always going to be. That's why I don't resonate with the traditional disorder meaning of narcissist, like attributing it with a disorder, because it kind of adds a level of permanence to the word. It's not permanent. Energy is mutable. Personality is mutable. So people can change, but they have to want to change. They have to be ready to change. But you don't have to deal with the abuse. You have to be there for yourself. That's what this video is really aiming to emphasize, is that you can get through this. It gets better. Keep pushing. If you're still in the thick of this, you've got to step up and support yourself. Do not listen to anybody else who may be telling you that you're invalid for your experience. I'm here to share my story with you so that you can know that you're valid, especially for those of you who relate to the specific scenarios that I mentioned in my experience. You are valid. What you're going through is very real, and you can get through it. You're going to get through it, okay? I really, really love you guys. I appreciate you so much. I know that one of you out there is going to solve the cancer problem. I know that one of you out there is going to solve the hunger problem. There are so many of you out there that have so many gifts to bring to the table, but your light is being shut out by somebody who seeks to keep you down because they are wounded. But you have to see through the bullshit. You have to see through the abuse. You are worthy. You are powerful, and you're going to make it through this, okay? I really love you guys so much. I'm so thankful for every single one of you out there. If you've made it this far and you watched this whole video, I really, really appreciate you. And I hope that you found value in this video. I hope that you found wisdom in this video. And I hope that you'll share this video with anybody who you feel it may resonate with. Because you literally could be saving lives, guys, with this video. And that's why I was so pushed to put this out. Because I know that there's people's lives out there that are at stake because of these kinds of people. So I just wanted to put this out. Again, I really appreciate you guys. If you resonated with this video, feel free to check out more of my work. You can check all of that stuff out down below in the description box and on my channel. But I will see you later. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.